Welcome to Support Life, a program focusing on current social issues from a life-affirming perspective. I'm Gavin Baulch and my guest is Chad Loftis. Chad, welcome.
Thanks, Gavin.
You've travelled a fair few kilometres, you could say, to get here today?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how many, but...
A lot?
A few, yeah.
Okay. But things started off over in the US, didn't they? For you?
You mean for my life?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was born in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Spent a few years there until I moved to Australia when I was about 6.
Okay. But then your parents have moved around a bit too.
Well, my dad was... he's from the US as well, but he was actually raised in Jamaica. Mm-hmm. His parents were mission workers over there.
Okay.
Yep. My mum's from a little town in West Virginia, so she hasn't moved as much. Until she came to Australia, yeah.
Well, you certainly don't have any twangs, or your accent's pretty Aussie.
I try to get rid of the twangs as much as I can.
Did you?
Yeah.
So the beard filters that out? Is that the idea?
That's the idea, yeah.
Well,
at the moment, yeah.
That's a good start. So you're in Australia now, but for what reason?
Well, actually, normally I live in Thailand, which I think is why you were saying I came from a fair way. But we're back here for a few months, just catching up with family and friends and our sponsors.
Good.
Yeah.
And of course, we will at 3 times have a word from our sponsor during the show.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I think you might have different sponsors to me, but...
I think so. All right, so let's go back to those younger days, and what were the kind of key moments in your life that you remember, say, pre-high school or pre-university? What were they?
Yeah, well, up until I turned 6, when we came to Australia, we moved around quite a bit. We were part of a quite conservative Baptist denomination that my parents were part of, and my dad was moving from different pastoral jobs. So yeah, I remember spending a lot of time in church, especially once my parents decided to go overseas as mission workers. They had to go from church to church raising funds. So we spent a lot of time in church. And then, yeah, when I was 6, we picked up and came to this new place, and actually moved out to Warrnambool by the sea for a year first, and then moved to Melbourne. Okay,
so what did you like about this newfound land?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure initially what I liked about it, other than the fact that it was different, it was something a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Because we'd moved so much, I hadn't really put down any strong roots. I mean, I was only young, but I hadn't put down any strong connections or relationships. So I was quite happy to sort of do whatever my family was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And once we sort of got settled in Melbourne, I started to make some connections. I started to establish some long-term friendships. So I think that's probably the thing that most connected me to this place.
Okay. But as a young person, or even a teenager, you don't necessarily follow what your parents believe, do you? Sort of, you just take it on, or do you have an aha moment? Or
yeah, I'd say for me, like I said, my parents were quite conservative, evangelical Christians, and I did go along with that for quite a while. We had to return to the US every few years, and we'd spend several months there. And it was on one of those trips when I was a teenager that I really started to ask myself, is this something that I want to continue with? And I came to the decision that it was something that I wanted for my own life, that I wanted to follow Jesus, that I wanted to be a part of this whole thing that we call church. And there were literally a lot of sleepless nights during that time, thinking about these things. But I made that decision, and I think because I made the decision then for myself, I decided, as I often do for a lot of things in my life, I decided that if I was going to do this, I needed to do it really, really well. I needed to do it properly. And so that meant for me quite a few years of, I don't know if you call it self-flagellation or sort of self-torment in some ways, really trying to prove to God that I was devoted to Him, that I really that my life was really his, you know, and that I think somewhat misguidedly was often focused on how much time I would spend reading my Bible, how much time I would spend in prayer every day. I'd spend hours at night. Sometimes it'd be, 1 a.m. I'd be falling asleep on my book as I read.
And feeling guilty about it?
And feeling totally guilty about it, yeah. And I remember at school sometimes I would even, I would forego having my lunch break. I'd just be sitting there reading my Bible because I thought this is the way to prove to myself and to God and to everyone else that, this is what my life was all about.
All right, at this point, if you'd had one of those evaluation things by Briggs and Co. or whatever, would that have put you in the perfectionist arena, do you think, or what?
There's a good chance, I think, yeah. It's really pushing myself, yeah.
All right. So are you still inclined to be a detailed person and want some order in your life?
I think everybody wants a bit of some sort of order. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily an order person, though, but I do like to try and do things well, if I can. But I've really learned over the years, and partly from that experience, that kind of tormenting yourself, beating yourself up in that way, isn't particularly helpful.
Yes.
And I think I've had to come to grips with the fact that when you put those kind of expectations on yourself, it's hurtful to you, but also it puts you in a position where it's hard to really enter in and respect others too, because when you have high standards for yourself, you can't help but see all the flaws in others.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So how did you work that through to become the person you are now?
Well, it's not a particularly exciting story, but because it happened over time.
Yes.
But when I moved away from home, I went back to the US after I finished high school, and moved to Chicago actually, and I was living right in the middle of the big city. And I think this provided me with a lot of opportunities to see other ways of life, other ways of living, other ways of thinking about life, even other ways of thinking about faith. And I just found myself leaving behind some of those almost obsessive habits of trying to please God. Kind of entered a period of my life where I would say I wasn't bothering at all about trying to please God.
Well, Chad, on that, we do have to please our sponsors.
Okay.
You're watching Support Life, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life, and I'm Gavin Baulch, and my guest is Chad Loftis. Chad, we were talking about this kind of obsessive compulsion, pleasing others. How did that work out for you?
I think I started to realize, as I was going through Bible college and getting older, I started to realize that a lot of my, as you say, my obsession with trying to have this deep and very devoted relationship between me and God was an intensely individual thing. And it slowly began to dawn on me that throughout Scripture, for instance, there isn't necessarily this obsession with an individual connection with God, a deep inner connection. In fact, a lot of the figures in the Bible that were close to God or professed to be close to God often connected with Him much more on a communal level or a corporate level. And as this slowly kind of unfolded, I realized how deeply this individualistic thing is kind of rooted in the way I was raised. And I realized it takes so much pressure off when you can be part of a group of people who are worshipping and trying to serve God, and it's not all up to you. Yeah. Okay.
Now, in that, you're developing your own skill set, or you're discovering your own skill set. So tell me about the interplay.
Yeah, so I was training to become a counselor or a therapist, whichever word you prefer. And that was also opening my eyes to a lot of new ways of thinking about myself, of thinking about the world. I got married and we came back to Australia, and while I was practicing as a counsellor here in Australia, I was introduced to some ideas that really cemented this concept of taking on kind of more of a communal responsibility for things. And I started to see how much trouble this individualism that we have can cause people, you know. And I was certainly seeing that a lot in the people that were coming to consult with me about their depression or their anxiety or their, the sort of rage they were feeling against people in their lives. I was seeing how much this pressure to be all in all on your own, how much that was, playing into these struggles that they were having in life.
Now, the people coming across your path, a mix of, say, those with Christian faith and those not, or?
Yeah, initially, so that was the case, yeah. I had people who were committed Christians or part of a church, and others who had no connection with that. But I found that there was a lot of similarities. It's not as though people are that different.
That's right. So the human condition is kind of a little readable. You see a bit of this and that in everyone.
Mm.
Okay. Now, what are the strengths in your faith walk? What makes that solid? But then how do you integrate your personal gifts and life's university? How did that come together for a call?
I don't know. I think I've always been someone who really connected with this idea that, that God can, as He lays out sort of the road of your life in front of you, that can really be related to what you care about, what's important to you and the things that you love to do. And I think that's so far been the case for me. Some people may have had other experiences, but my wife and I had talked for a long time about doing overseas mission work. And we started to inquire about it. We thought, we really want to, we loved living in Australia, we loved living in Melbourne, but we thought we really want to contribute where maybe our skills or our time could be a little bit more useful. And so we inquired, and I was told, look, you've got these therapeutic skills. And also at the time I'd been studying professional writing. And they said there's actually 2 jobs that would perfectly fit in with things you want to do. You could work as a counselor, working with expats and missionaries throughout Asia, and you could also work doing a lot of media stuff to continue bringing in the financial support that's required to do a lot of this non-profit work. That's how we sort of ended up in Thailand. And I feel like God has really, He's really privileged me to be able to keep doing things that I like to do and find small ways, to help kind of a very large group of people who are trying to make a difference in the world.
Okay. Now, would you call it a call or a vocation? What words would you use to sum up?
Well, some people use the word call and vocation are probably quite similar, but a lot of people use the word call almost as if, God sort of spoke to them out of the clouds, and no one can really say anything about that because
it's a trump card.
And I think it's again, it goes back to this individualistic thing. It's kind of like, this is my personal call. But that's not our experience. Our experience, my wife and I, has been that our lives have unfolded, like a story. And all the things that have come in the past have led up to what's happened now. And it's really also been a community thing. We've had a lot of people around us who've said, we think this would fit for you.
Okay. So you found something precious, okay?
Yeah.
And there's the Fellowship of the Rings taking place. Pad that out a bit.
That's right. So we really looked to the people in our community to, I suppose, in some ways verify or to help solidify this sense of vocation. And I think that has proved to be like so supportive of us in doing the work, because you have people around you that are saying, this is right for you, this is a fit, this connects. And as I sit with people in Thailand that are doing non-profit work, that are many of them trying to save the world, you know. They're trying to help people out of sexual slavery. They're trying to introduce education in places where it doesn't exist. They're trying to bring the good news about Jesus into places where no one's ever heard of Jesus. As I sit with them in counseling, I'm finding that this sense of burden of having to, all on your own basically, just you and God, do these amazing things, is really strengthening for me how important it is. Again, I know I'm repeating myself, but to be part of a community, to do these things together, to be part of something bigger, a larger picture.
Chad, we're part of a larger picture, and we need to go to our sponsors. You're watching Support Life, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Baulch, and my guest today is Chad Loftis. Chad, you've shared some interesting things about yourself and community, how they and you have found a fit. You're in Thailand.
Yep.
Now, how does this fit work? What are you doing, and who's knocking on your door?
It's not super easy to explain what I'm doing, but I work for a counseling center called The Well, and we get people coming from literally from all over Asia who are doing non-profit work and missionary work, and they come in to Chiang Mai, where I am in Thailand, to get sometimes longer-term therapy, sometimes short-term counseling or debriefing, and a whole host of other things that we provide them. And also I work with some people who are living locally, but mainly my work has to do with helping those people who are trying to serve the communities where they live, whether it's in China or in Thailand or in Nepal or in even as far out as like Afghanistan, North Korea, places like that. I'm trying to serve them, help them walk through, the troubles they might be having with their family or their marriage, traumas they've experienced. So yeah, that's one of the, and I also do a bit of support for a anti-trafficking team who are living in Chiang Mai.
Okay, so that's the sex slave industry.
So occasionally I do some work supporting them as they try and help people out of sexual exploitation.
Well, that's there's 27 million or more rising every day that are trapped in that kind of slavery.
Yeah, it's horrific what's going on actually. Yeah.
All right, and you've got a burden for couples serving in this area of not-for-profits, and particularly men. Is that what I'm reading?
I wouldn't say particularly men. I'd say really for both. I think especially what I've really started to see, and this is through my counseling work and also my own personal experience with my family, is that when families go to do this kind of work, especially when they have young children, so often it's the husbands who have a job to do, and the women are often at home looking after the kids. And sometimes that's by choice. Often that's by choice, but it still leaves them really vulnerable because they're in a place where they don't have the usual kind of family and community support that they would have had in their home country. And they also feel the same pressures that their husbands are feeling to try and make a difference in the place where they are, to try and do something about the poverty that they see, about things like, sexual slavery. And that could just be so overwhelming, trying to take care of small kids, trying to also save the world, and doing it without any kind of support. And also sometimes, and this is something that I don't think gets talked about too much, but there's a lot of pressure from back home on these people because they might be sending money.
Yep.
There might be donors and sponsors who are funding this work.
Yep.
And also there's a lot of expectation that when people are doing any kind of charitable work, that they do it sort of perfectly. They need to be saints, basically.
Yep.
They need to.
And so here are the families that are just torn with the same sort of compulsion, male, female, mother at home. Dad, you've got your job title. They don't.
That's right, and I think it's really important. you mentioned about the men, I think it's really important for the husbands in these scenarios, the husbands and fathers, to realize how much easier it can be for them because they have this job title, because they have this this work that they can go to every day to help them fulfill kind of what they're there for. And I think it's really important for families to work together to try and make this possible. And I also think it's really important for the communities back home that are supporting them in different ways to just to dial back the pressure, you know, the expectation to be heroes, to be perfect, to do it all without complaining.
So what you touched on originally in your own life is we can make it hard by placing the wrong expectations on ourselves and others.
And I think that's, I'm really thankful that I have had a lot of those experiences in my own journey, because I'm seeing it so often now. I'm seeing people who are just crushed under the weight of pressure that they feel, that often you would say they're putting on themselves, but it's not just that, it's coming from the culture that they're a part of. And I think it's hard to be any other way than to expect that you will do everything really well. And on top of that, you're in a place where often, even if back home you are, you know, a low income earner, that low income is still vast riches compared to some of the people that you might be living and working with.
Yeah.
And that can also increase the sense of guilt, the sense of expectation on yourself.
Yeah.
And I just think we can do without these things, you know, they cause a lot of problems and don't do that much good.
So what might you say to someone who's watching that's carrying this burden, right? And they're like, how do I get out of this trapped state? What would you say?
Getting out of it's not so easy, but I think it's virtually impossible to do on your own. And I think I've been a bit of a broken record talking about that, but I think what I've found in my life, what I've found as I've worked with others, is that unless you have people around you that can help to share this burden, that can help to normalize the sense of making mistakes, I think it's almost impossible. You can't do it by yourself.
Yeah. So we're saying Jesus with his community and you in the midst of that, that's where help comes best.
Yeah, and I would say I think in my life I've found that the community of God has been extremely helpful to me in this. But I think there's a bit of a danger that sometimes we, as Christians, we like to talk about, well, all I need is Jesus to help me, or all I need is God to help me. And I think sometimes that's just another way of saying, I'm going to do this on my own. Yeah. Because I think, and again, this might not be others' experience, but in my life, I've found that God has spoken to me most often and has ministered to me most often through his people.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, Chad, that's a good note to finish on. Thank you.
Thanks, Gavin.
You've been watching Support Life, and that's all for our program today. Join us again next week. Goodbye.